Wherever you're listening in the world, it's a pleasure to welcome you to IsraelCast, the podcast powered by Jewish National Fund USA, your voice in Israel. I'm Steven Shalowitz, first reminding you that for 120 years, Jewish National Fund USA has been the premier philanthropic movement for the land and people of Israel. While best known for planting trees in Israel, JNF USA contributes to Israeli life in so many ways, including community development in the Negev and the Galilee, preservation of heritage sites, supporting people with disabilities, and connecting high school and college students to Israel. To learn more and to see how you can contribute, do visit jnf.org. Once again, hope you got it, jnf.org. All right, as for this episode, I am beyond honored to welcome Israel's Minister of Diaspora Affairs, Dr. Nachman Shai, to the program. Now, before taking on his current position, the minister devoted many years in the service of Israel and the strengthening of the relationship between the Jewish state and Jewish people. The minister served as a member of Knesset representing the Labor Party from 2009 to 2019. During his time there, he founded and co-chaired the Caucus for Strengthening the Jewish People. Minister Shai has held a number of positions in government, military, and media. Most prominently, he served as the Israel Defense Force spokesperson with the rank of Brigadier General and was commander and editor-in-chief of Israel Army Radio. Following his military career, the minister held several positions in government, including Director General of the Ministry of Science, Culture, and Sport. The minister also served as the Senior Vice President and Director General of the Jewish Federations of North America in Israel. And before taking on his current position, the minister was a visiting professor on U.S. college campuses, teaching Israeli public diplomacy. He holds a PhD in political science and communications from Bar-Ilan University and has published 3 books focused on the intersection of Israeli diplomacy, media, and security. And let me tell you, that's just a fraction of Minister Shai's background. More of his phenomenal life will be shared during our conversation, which begins right now as the minister joins us via Zoom from his home office. Welcome to IsraelCast, Minister Shai.
Thank you, Steven. Good afternoon. I'm happy. I'm very pleased to be on the show. And thank you for your presentation. I have nothing to it.
Oh, right. Well, we're so delighted to have you. And we've got, as we do with all of our guests, so many bases to cover. And I want to dive in right now and talk about your visit with Russell Robinson, CEO of Jewish National Fund USA, because right afterwards, he actually posted a picture of the two of you on social media. And one of the comments that was written that I'd like you to respond to was, and I'm quoting here the comment, quote, "For those of us who were in Israel during the Gulf War, the minister was the calm voice who told us when to come out of our sealed rooms," unquote. Now, can you take us back to that time? How did you do that? How did you keep people calm? And indeed, it's truly a glowing tribute to you that someone all these years later remembered it. And of course, you weren't minister at the time, you were in a different position, but talk about how you did that.
Yes, thank you. First of all, it's so kind of Russell to remind the audience, that the public. Yeah, but it happens that so many people still remember the first Gulf War. It was a unique war. It was from many aspects, but the most important one, it was that we, maybe for the first time in our history, we were heavily, I would say, Israel's airspace was penetrated heavily by incoming rockets from the distance, from Iraq. It has never happened before, and hopefully will never happen again. But we know in between, rockets were fired from Gaza, from Lebanon. It may happen or reoccur in the future too. But what's so unique is that it was not just missiles, long-range missiles from Iraq. It was missiles that we rightly suspected that may carry either biological or chemical warheads. This was a major threat to Israel. We have no idea. Historically, there were ways to counter biological or chemical weapons, but this is something very scary, very, very scary. So my role at the time was IDF spokesperson, and on the very first hours of this war, which, as I said before, was so unique because Israel has never responded. It never responded, just was bombarded by those missiles. I was asked by then the defense minister, the late Moshe Arens, and the chief of staff, the late Dan Shomron, to become the public spokesperson for the government, for the state, not only for the IDF. But it was not just a regular spokesmanship, Stephen. It was not just spokesmanship, which is a position that I knew how to handle. It was something more different. I addressed the entire people all ages, speaking all languages, from all levels, with not much understanding of military stuff. And here I am sitting in front of television, camera or microphone, telling them what to do for hours, just by myself, no one else. It was me and the public, direct communication, no interference of any radio or television or announcer or anchorman between us, just me and them, a direct dialogue. And people since then remember that it was me who gave them the order to get into sealed rooms, and then the order to get out of the sealed room for hours. And they were sitting sealed rooms, gas mask on, with their pets, with their family members, with grandmothers and grandfathers and children, babies all together in one room, just waiting for the word to come, what to do. And so this kind of feeling has continued to prevail for over 30 years. And even now, wherever I go, on my flight back to Israel, just the day before yesterday, a few people approached me and said, we still remember that, and others. So my usual answer is, okay, you can get out of the sealed room, or you can drink water. By the way, water became also a very famous slogan, because people ask me what to do. As I said, you know what? Drink water. Why water? I said, water helps very much. Of course, when we talk about JNF and water, this is another matter. We can speak for hours how JNF helps Israel to build water reservoir, right? That's something else to do with it. At the time, I don't believe there were that many in Israel. But water helped me to bring some sense of humor, some relaxation. Again, you should understand this was a huge challenge. There were 6 million people at the time. Now we have in Israel, now there are over 9 million. And 6 million people almost were all dependent on me, which was a great challenge. And I kept telling myself, don't disappoint them and don't lie to them. Don't lie to them. Tell them the truth and only the truth. And that was the core of my success. I told the truth. I shared the information with the public, all the available information in any given point. And that's what helped me at the time to be successful, because people trusted me. They knew that I would not lie to them. And my rating was over 100%, if possible, really, seriously. And as an IDF spokesperson, I knew how important it is to enjoy such a high rating in the public eye. So I was lucky. It passed, thanks God. I didn't lie. I didn't fail, thank God. And I survived since 30 years since then, which is also not a minor thing.
And how did you stay calm yourself during that time? Because you didn't have someone to listen to.
Nachman. That's true. And by the way, I'm not a very calm person, and it was quite a change. So I had to actually to stop every time when it came to the point when the microphone went on or the camera was on, and I said, now calm down, speak slowly, use your voice, the voice that I used to talk on radio, because I was a radio reporter and television reporter, so I had a lot of media experience. And I said, this is the time to talk to your mother, which I used to, and tell your mother what do you feel, and tell her how you expect her to behave, and be calm. I actually started with the process with myself. And before and after, I assure you, I was not calm at all. I was nervous, I was upset, I was concerned, I was myself asking myself so many questions. But when the time came for this, we started with 6 hours since the missiles arrived, landed in Israel, until the last time it was like 15 minutes altogether, because we were professional already and very experienced, so we can give the orders to the public very quickly. I had to go through this meditation by myself, sit down, relax, don't raise your voice, because I knew that I can inspire the people what to do during those minutes and hours. And I also expected the worst, that thank God, didn't happen because there was any non-conventional weapon used against Israel during the first Gulf War.
Listen, all good professionals that are on radio and television speak to one person. They don't speak to an audience. They don't speak to a lot of people. So you're very wise in thinking about that in terms of speaking to your mother or a grandmother. Speaking to one person is an individual. Fabulous. Listen, we can do a whole episode just on that experience. We'd actually love to have you back to learn more about that period in history.
With COVID-19 was very similar. Also unknown enemy, something people have never experienced, and also wearing masks and also staying home. So there were so many similarities between the two situations. Some people said, why are you back? So I'm back as a government minister, and I'm now helping my government to overcome the public's concern on COVID-19. I'm not the only spokesperson on the air, but once in a while, when I have the opportunity, I talk to the public and I address the public and I encourage them to get vaccinated and so on. And I'm using my prestige, I would say, our credibility, that's a better word, just for that matter, because I'd like to see as many as possible Israelis being vaccinated.
As they say, you've been to this rodeo before, right?
Yes.
Well, Dr. Shai, I'd love to pivot now and talk about the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs. And if you can really share with our global audience, we have listeners in countries around the world, some of which Israel doesn't even have diplomatic ties with. What is the mission of the ministry, and really what are your goals for it?
The ministry existed since, was established, or existed since 2000, or actually 1999. First time when Ehud Barak became Israel's prime minister, and he appointed then Knesset member Rabbi Michael Malkior, to be the first deputy minister for diaspora affairs. Since then, it became a full portfolio, and we have had quite a number of government ministers serving in that position, including Yuli Edelstein and Natan Sharansky, and Naftali Bennett himself, and Omer Yankelevich and others. So quite a number of Knesset members or politicians served in that position. The major role was and still is, and we are, once every few years, we reassess the role and figure out what we should do, is strengthening the relationship between Israel and the diaspora, which means that we have to work on the two ends, on the Israeli audience. I hope you'll ask me about that as well, and our audience or our public Jews in the diaspora, Jewish diaspora out of Israel. Altogether, 15 million people, which I have to deal with, but on one certain issue, the relationship between Jews living in Israel and Jews living out of the country. This is my major goal, and I have a small staff. And I have a relatively big budget, not too big, but enough to pay or to allocate money to quite a number of projects. All of them are on the same axis of Israel and the diaspora.
And Dr. Shai, the diaspora is so diverse. I can't imagine it being a one-size-fits-all policy. So how does that work, and how do you approach then the diaspora?
Well, first of all, I approach them by talking to them, as I do now this webinar, and I do it on other ways, on Zoom and interviews, and just figuring out meetings every day. We have a meeting with a rabbi here, a community there, a group in Russia, a community in Uzbekistan. Actually, I'm very available, I would say. I make myself available because of you just said, it's so diverse world. I myself am surprised. You know, recently we had a call with the upcoming Jewish community in Dubai. How many Jews there are in Dubai now? 500. They speak 500 different accents, believe me. On the call itself, I figured out there were British accent, American accent, French accent, Russian accent. All of them came together from whatever reasons. Now they live in Dubai. And let me tell you, Steven, in 2 years, there'll be 2,000 or 3,000 Jews living in Dubai because they all know they are attracted to the business opportunities there. But every day I have to deal with a different community, and I have to come up with different knowledge, what to do and how to help. But let me tell you something dramatic that happened. Now we are looking at the diaspora, at our diaspora, asking ourselves, what can we do for them? Not what they are going to do for us. That's the whole difference. It's not only what JNF USA is doing for Israel, tremendously great things, but what can we do for JNF USA or for the American Jewish community in general? This is something new. This is a new attitude. This is a new paradigm that I'm leading now.
Yeah, and I want to pick up on a thread that you started just a moment ago, and also building on what you just said, Dr. Shai, because the diaspora doesn't really know Israel. And conversely, Israel doesn't really know the diaspora. So it's part of your responsibility, as I'm hearing, to bridge that divide. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. I would say there is ignorance and arrogance on both sides, and give it some thinking. Both sides, both parties do not know enough of each other. But by the way, I think the American Jewish community knows more about Israel than Israelis know about them. That's for sure. And also a little bit of arrogance as well. We see what are they doing there? We ask them what kind of life they have, and what are issues on their agenda. Israelis ask. And if they have problems with some challenges with anti-Semitism, why don't they come immediately and live in Israel? It's such a simple decision. On the other hand, Americans sometimes said to themselves, what do they think about themselves, those Israelis? They know everything. They teach us what to do. With all the respect, we also know something. We have our own life here. We have done something in our life, and so on and so forth, especially those who live in the United States. But Jews all over the world, they have their own world, and they don't necessarily look for Israel for advice or for some ideas how to run their life. So that's also a kind of arrogance that we have to settle. But ignorance, as you said, is the major obstacle. Now we are focusing on bridging that gap, as you rightly said, by expanding our operation in Israel to teach the Israelis about the diaspora. Because I belong to a generation, by the way, that was born just with the state of Israel. What is diaspora for us? What was diaspora for us? The diaspora was the place where my grandfather, grandmother, and my aunt and uncle murdered by the Nazis on the Holocaust. This was diaspora. And the only thing you can say about the diaspora is diaspora killed the Jewish people. So that's why we have a Jewish state now, to feel safe, to have our own independence, to have our own sovereignty. But that's not the whole story now. I know that. 75 years later, I can tell you, I know more about the diaspora. These were real Jewish life, rich Jewish life. Even the Jews were poor, but their life were rich with literature, rich with major achievements, with philosophy, with art, with all kinds of aspects. They were not just being murdered once in a while by their neighbors in a pogrom or in the Holocaust. There was something else. And the very fact that Jews survived for thousands of years, the only nation on earth that survived for so many years, it speaks something for the special character of the Jewish people. And that story has not been told at least enough, and at least not for the upcoming generation, that we have to pay more and more attention, because now Israelis hardly have any relatives out of the country. My generation still had relatives, but first of all, our relatives passed away, and 78% of the Israelis living now in Israel were born in Israel, in the Jewish state. So all the relatives and friends, and you know what friendship means for Israelis, are here in the country. They're not living in New York or in Buenos Aires or in London. They live here in Israel.
You just invoked anti-Semitism, and I want to ask you, who should really lead the fight against anti-Semitism? Is it Israel? Is it Jews in the diaspora? Is it a combination thereof? Because one of the things that we've seen, especially over the last couple of years, is you have celebrities that have just millions and millions of social media followers, and they're tweeting out, they're posting on Instagram about BDS and about the Zionist entity and just spewing out anti-Israel rhetoric, and they've planted these seeds. So who should be digging up those seeds to try and destroy those seeds?
It's a great question. It's a great question that I keep asking myself, because according to the decision, according to the Israeli government, this is my role as a government minister to deal with combating anti-Semitism. This is my role. I have one person dealing with combating anti-Semitism. There's another person in the foreign ministry, and they summarize it all more or less. There's Yad Vashem, some research institutes, but in terms of combating anti-Semitism, which is rising, as you know, especially since the last summer, we don't do enough. We do very little. And I feel shame about it. And I think that this is one of the primary responsibilities of the state of Israel, of this government. And we cannot leave it as is. And since our life here and our operations and our decisions impact so much Jews living out of the country, including anti-Semitism, because if you learn what happened since the summer up until now, when there is a rise of hundreds of percent of anti-Semitism cases on the social media and in the streets of New York or of Brooklyn or anywhere, or London or Paris or elsewhere, then you see the connection, the linkage between what Israel has been doing and Jewish life in the diaspora. So we have to take care of anti-Semitism and to combat anti-Semitism. How? That's a good question. We can do it government to government. We can do it by organization or NGO versus against NGO in Israel and abroad, and people to people too. And what I plan is to build in my office a certain branch for combating anti-Semitism and to recruit more people and to continue what we are doing and much more. For example, we are currently monitoring the social media networks. We are monitoring them constantly, machines, of course, algorithm, not people, not human people, but we got the outcome. We can't, the content we can read now better than any time before, and we realize how much anti-Semitic content are on social media because it's so available, so cheap, so inexpensive, so people can say whatever they want. This is a freedom of expression, but again, the question if it's not being abused by so many individuals. So it's our role now to monitor the social media, to figure out what's going on, to analyze what's going on, to turn to the media management, wherever they are, and demand and insist that they remove some anti-Semitic content, and at the same time found a way how to combat anti-Semitism, not only in the street of New York, London, Paris, which governments will do, the national governments will do, that's what we expect them to do, but also to do our role in watching the scene, in monitoring the scene, and in consulting with other governments. So there's so much to do on that front. We haven't done enough. We've done very little.
And of course, some responsibility also is in the hands of just Jews themselves. In other words, to be proud of your Jewish heritage and to share your Judaism with others. I mean, I think that that's something that we've talked about here on IsraelCast. You have to be proud yourself and you have to understand your heritage and you have to then be able to combat it. Yeah.
No doubt, we know of DL and other organizations. Actually, let me tell you very, very honestly, if we figure out what we want to do and it costs any money, I've already been told by quite a number of philanthropists and foundations, just tell us how much you need, and the money will be waiting for you in your bank account, literally, because the Jewish people, today's Jewish people understand that this is a major threat. I shouldn't tell you how many organizations in America from left and from right are threatening Jews, many of them. And they are not just the extreme right or the extreme left. Sometimes it remains in the center and you say, wow, that's not exactly anti-Semitic message. That's not anti-Semitism. Well, we have to look at it very, very carefully. And I'm not speaking only about the United States, where Jews are safe, I would say. In general, they are safe. But there are other states where there are small, very small communities. Like, why don't we take Romania? There are 8,000 Jews live all together. 80 different communities. What do you mean? What do you mean communities? 50 families here, 20 families there. So there's not any protection. No one defends them. No one takes care of them. They live separately from each other. And they are openly then, and they are exposed to anti-Semitism. There's not much to do. And I can't tell them, move to Bucharest. They live where they are. I can't then make Aliyah to Israel. Those who wanted to make Aliyah did or will do. But that's not the way to resolve the issue, if there is any solution of anti-Semitism, but just telling the Jews, come to Israel. Jews have to feel safe wherever they are. Not only that, they deserve, they are entitled to live full Jewish life with kashrut, with circumcision their way, with any rich Jewish ritual wherever they are. I participated in a conference in Malmö, Sweden, 2 months ago. The EU, the European Union, presented for the first time 10-year of strategic plan, how to foster Jewish life on the one hand and combat anti-Semitism on the other hand in the European Union. The first one I've ever seen. Hopefully United States will follow suit and other states, and Israel. Israel should have a plan like that. Why not Israel?
I want to go back to the notion of the diaspora, because you were educated in part in the United States. You taught in the United States. I'm just really curious, your thoughts on American Jewry's understanding of Israel. And have you seen a change over time of American Jewry's understanding of Israel?
Yes, of course. Our days, I would say in general, the American Jewry moved from center to left, while Israel has moved from center to right. So we are now getting more distance from each other, more remote from each other. That's a major issue. It's not only about the young generation, by the way, which is even moving even more to the left, or the liberal progressive aspects of or ends of American public opinion. It's true about the majority. Historically, this is the generation change between 2 generations ago to our generation. The 48 or the 56 or the 70, 67 or even the 73 generation, Jewish generation. I specifically mentioned previous wars of Israel, 48, 56, 60. These that the first 20, 34 years of existence still belong to the generation which admired Israel, witnessed the major miracle of our generation, a kind of build of the rise of a Jewish state, the inception of a Jewish state, and they lived under the shadow of this miracle. But the next generation, the one and the second, the first and the second, well, they develop certain criticism towards Israel. They don't know, most of them, the history. They don't know how it started. They have their own opinion of the very fact, which is the fact that Israel controls the life of few millions Palestinians, both in Judea, Samaria, and in Gaza. I'm excluding the Israeli Arab, that's a different matter. They justifyingly asking questions, why is it so? We have to come with answer. And also different kind of Jews. I mean, for them, Israel is a fact. Is a fact. It's not a dream. Israel exists, and no one challenges the existence of Israel, which is not true. There are some threats on Israel's existence, but then they say, okay, so now we would like to know what's going on in Israel. Why are you behaving like that? Why are you doing this and that? That's a new time. That's a change, major change comparison with the past. And let me tell you, Steven, we have to be A, aware of it, and B, answer the question and respond to those queries and be available for every American Jew, or no, not necessarily American, who comes up and said, okay, guys, I'd like to understand what's going on there. Will you tell me? And yes, I have to tell him or her or them. Yes.
Yeah, because we know that years ago, let's just say like about 25 years ago or so, high schools were coming to Israel in droves in tens of thousands per year. And that
Right.
number has really dropped. It's dropped tremendously.
Yeah,
And
15,000 used to come,
Mhm.
but now the numbers are back. And last year there were 7,500. And our ministry is one of the partnership that we are now producing with Americans and foundations, philanthropists, and other is bringing more and more teenagers now to Israel to return to the numbers, the past numbers. But that's in addition to Taglit, to Birthright, and to Momentum, another project which brings 7,000 women to Israel every year. We would like to enlarge, I mean, forget about Corona now, we would like to enlarge the number of Americans and non-Americans, Jews coming to Israel for as long as they want to come. Masa, I should include here as well, with the Jewish Agency. And there's nothing better than the Israel experience. If we can give any Jew, many of them have never been to Israel. Can you believe it? 40%, as far as I know, even higher percentage, have never been to Israel. If you still bring them to Israel and they will see Israel by their own eyes, that may change their perception of Israel dramatically.
And of course, JNF has high school in Israel, the Must High School in Israel, which
Right.
is, we're going to talk about the new World Zionist Village that's being built in Beersheba in a second, because part of the campus will also be housed there. But just building on what we were just talking about, what are some of those barriers then you see, Dr. Shai, for reasons why kids aren't wanting to go to Israel? And then how do you break down those barriers?
Well, Bernie Marcus, the Marcus Foundation, just allocated $20 million to bring teens to Israel. And as I said before, we are now investing in high school students because we believe that when they come to college, it's a little bit too late. Mm-hmm. They are not prepared for what is waiting for them down there. So it's all about money. Those trips are but they are relatively expensive, and someone should pick up the bill. So with Taglit, we are fine, and we know where we are. And Taglit is, by the way, is a partnership of the Taglit, or Birthright, of the government of Israel and Jewish philanthropies, mainly now the Ederson family, Miriam and late Sheldon Ederson, but others too. There are quite a number of philanthropists helping Taglit, Birthright. But Masa is another project, also bringing 12,000 young people to Israel for periods starting from months up to a year, and then more and more of them. The more we invest on that, even by facing with the financial by financial resources or financial difficulties, is a pure contribution to the better understanding of Israel by those who come and live in Israel for a while and have this unique experience of living in the country, of sharing their life with us. And this is something they can take with them back home and probably will keep them in the system for many years to come.
Yeah. And for any of our listeners that want to learn more about really the importance of bringing young people to Israel, we had Izzy Tapuchi, who's the CEO of Birthright, here on the program just several episodes ago. So certainly our listeners can check out that episode to learn more.
I know Izzy very well. He's a good friend of mine.
Isn't he a great guy?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And he's dealing with the Birthright Foundation, raising money to pay for at least 50,000 a year. Well, this last year we had now just 9,000. It's all because COVID. And we hope very much that Omicron will leave us alone and disappear from our life. And so we can open the borders again and let more and more of Taglit and other educational visits or visitors to Israel to come and spend some time in the country. As I said before, it's not only about helping the tourism industry in Israel. That's not about money. It's about education. It's about creating a certain sense of understanding of those people of what is Israel is all about.
Well,
what Israel is all about.
Indeed. I just referenced the new World Zionist Village in Beersheba, which JNF, Jewish National Fund, is building. We're all very excited about that to bring about a greater understanding of Zionism. I'm just wondering your thoughts, because you must be terribly excited about it.
Russell Robinson told me it's a matter of $350 million. My goodness, that will change the Negev, that will change the South, and that will make Beersheba a real center for Jewish education. Russell, who is a visionary, what he has in mind is really building a center which will provide all kinds of services regarding Israel, serving as a hotel, as educational system, knowledge center of knowledge of Israel, and so on and so forth. And it will all be done in Beersheba, which is getting more and more the center city of Israel. Because if you look at the map, then Beersheba is at the center, not Tel Aviv. Of course, we know most of Israeli life are now centered in Tel Aviv, the commercial, business, financial services, so on and so forth, arts. But Israel is a small country and too congested, and we have to finally follow Ben-Gurion's dream. Go to the Negev, he said, and he did go to the Negev by himself, and then lived in Sde Boker, down south. Believe me, in 50 years from now, millions of people will be living there because there's no alternative. This is the only place. And they will have to develop life. What does it mean to live in the desert? It's very hot in the day, very cold at night. Winter is real winter, summer is real summer. But with renewed energy, we can help ourselves to make the life easier there. There's no other alternative. The Negev is the only option. Of course, we shouldn't forget about the nature there, and we should remember the open areas and the nature. But at the end of the day, Beersheba will serve as the heart of the Negev, and with this global village, the Zionist global village, it will be implemented.
Well, speaking of programs that Jewish National Fund has initiated and is moving forward with, JNF USA has launched a year-long campaign, Dr. Shai, which I think you're familiar with. It's called Conversations on Zionism, Reclaiming the Narrative. Once again, it's a year-long campaign really to reclaim the beauty, the inclusivity of what Zionism is all about. And we encourage all of our listeners all around the world to go to youtube.com/Zionism Studios. Once again, youtube.com/Zionism Studios to catch these important and I think just enlightening conversations. And by the way, they can also catch all episodes of IsraelCast there as well. So have to give our show a little plug there too. Once again, youtube.com/Zionism Studios. But with all that in mind, in terms of this year-long campaign, Conversations on Zionism, I'd really be remiss if I didn't ask you, what is your definition of Zionism? What aspect of Zionism, Dr. Shai, are you most proud of?
It's a good question. And I have to think a little bit about that, because the traditional way is to see Zionism just by living in Israel. To make Aliyah, that's what my parents did, my late parents in the past century, in the 30s. They came to Israel. My father, Eliezer, the late Eliezer, came from Belarus. My mother came from Poland. They met in Jerusalem, and they made Jerusalem their home for the entire life. They were Zionists. I'm not sure they knew they were Zionists, by the way. My father, I'm not sure, but they were Zionists, which means that they. But now I would say that being Zionist means that you even if you don't live physically in Israel, you make Zion, you make Israel the center of your life. You learn about Israel, you help Israel, you defend Israel wherever you can, you support Israel, you talk about Israel, even if you live out of the country. And it's not a matter of dual loyalty. Each and everyone should be loyal to the government, to the state where he or she lives in. There's no doubt about it. But still, deep in their hearts, they relate to Israel as their homeland. And I think this is the new Zionism. Now, what characteristic of the new Zionism is innovation, is I would say feeling of sense of partnership with social justice, I would say, being aware of the world's challenges and asking ourselves, how can we contribute to the world struggle on many issues, on hunger, on shortage of energy, shortage of water. What can we do in our own small corner? I know we cannot own the world, and we don't try, and we have to be humble and figure out our ability and what can we do about it. But in general, what the Prime Minister recently, when he went to Glasgow to the climate change conference, he said, why wouldn't we use Israel's high tech to find solution to the shortage of energy, or to renewable energy, or to overcome all kinds of issues that troubles the world now, and make this the future look so bleak and concerned. So for us, so I think that Israel has a lot to offer, using the endless resources of innovation here in Israel, the ability of Israel to adapt themselves, the Israelis to adapt themselves to different times, to different threats, to different sometimes enemies, figuring out how do you live, bearing in mind that you are surrounded with enemies. That creates, that builds a certain creativity in the Israelis, some flexibility, some restlessness, you know. It's not easy to be an Israeli, by the way, not at all, because you're always on alert. You don't know what will come next. But at the same time, it makes us very sharp and being aware of the world's challenges, looking for how can we help. I didn't mention Tikkun Olam, but that's our version or our comprehension of what Tikkun Olam means. What can I do in order to make the world a better place?
Well, thank you for sharing that. You know, you're really the right guy for me to ask the following question, Dr. Shai, because you're both a political scientist, you're really a historian, but you're also a communication specialist. So if you can take us back, how did the word Zionist become hijacked in so many circles and have a negative connotation among so many?
Well, we have so many enemies, all kinds of the traditional ones, the new ones. We don't, there's no shortage of enemies of the Jewish people in general, and of Israel in particular. This is the story of our history. So they also have abused the term Zionism and make the Zionism racism, as if the Zionist movement were aimed only to destroy the Arab nation or the Arab presence in Israel, which is a fake. This was our land. This is our homeland. Biblically, if you read the Bible, and the entire world knows what the Bible is, knows all the Bible is, and in the Bible you can see this is where our nation settled thousands of years ago, and this is the story of the Jewish people, and it all started from Eretz Israel. Okay, when we came here, we came back to our homeland. Arabs were living here too, Jews as well, but Arabs too, and that's how it's all started. But no one can deny our historical rights on the land of Israel. I myself now belong to the Labour Party, and the Labour Party major political platform is two nation states for two people. We do not deny the rights of the Arabs to live in what was Palestine and what is Eretz Israel as well. And I'm ready to painfully to share the land between them and us based on security considerations, because I understand there are Palestinians here. By the way, the word Palestine, the Palestinian people did not even exist at the time. This is a new version of Arabs presenting Palestinians, but I don't want to discuss it now because I recognize the Palestinians and I believe they are entitled to their own state side by side with Israel. If they finally understand that very fact, that Jews are here to live forever, not for 80 years as this was in the past, but forever, they will finally also accept that fact and finally sit down with us and negotiate the future, their future and our future. So far, well, ups and downs in this history, they refuse to make peace with us. Now we live relatively peacefully, but it's not the solution we will be looking for. And I believe that one day, sooner or later, we'll have to let the Palestinians have their own state, and Israel will be on the other side, being a democratic state, being a Jewish state, being a moral state, being a just state, and being a safe state. More importantly, a safe place for the Jewish people. That's the story of Israel. That's what history brought us here for. The Jews will live here safely.
Well, certainly one of the battlegrounds when it comes to anti-Zionist rhetoric is the college campus. And you've spent considerable amount of time on campuses, both as a student, as a professor. I mean, JNF USA has programs like Caravan for Democracy, faculty fellowships. Both are academically competitive programs, bringing non-Jewish campus leaders, in the case of Caravan for Democracy, to Israel to understand the country. And then professors in the faculty fellowship program, bringing them to Israel also to understand the country. And then when they go back, they then can at least address these issues about what Israel is all about. And these are non-Jewish students and non-Jewish faculty members. And so I would just love to hear your thoughts on non-Jewish engagement in terms of understanding the Israel story.
We focus on the Jewish diaspora, my ministry. The non-Jewish world, which is much bigger, is under the foreign ministry's responsibility. But I encourage any dialogue between Jews and non-Jews, both in Israel and out of the country. And what I'm very much hopeful is that Jews, students and academic from faculty and others also, all circles, will be able to serve as Israel's kind of ambassadors or emissaries that will be able to carry our messages, to convey the picture of Israel, the right picture of Israel, the correct picture of Israel to non-Jewish audiences. Now we struggle on social media, as you said, and on other fronts, and we need as many as possible voices. It's not about one voice any longer. And every individual, that's why I call upon your audience as well, every individual now worth 10,000 or 100,000 times what he did before, because we can use the social media to multiply our messages. So everyone who is ready to get to help the system and got in is most welcome, and we appreciate it very much.
Yeah, and I know one person that's tried to move the needle, as they say, is Titi Ayanow, the former Miss Israel, whom we had here on our program on IsraelCast. She's actually become a personal friend, and I know she speaks, for example, at college campuses throughout the United States to talk about what, indeed, the real story of Israel is. Well, we just have a few minutes left. I know you're a very busy man, and so we thank you so much for squeezing us.
Steven, there is rain right now outside. I'm so happy about that. Rain is so rare in Israel, and just now here, the rain is outside. That's something makes me happy. That's something which makes me.
Mashiv Haru Harid Hageshem.
Bakasha.
Right. So our prayers are answered.
Absolutely.
I'm sure it's very calming to hear the rain, isn't it?
And yeah, it's peaceful. It shows that nature is back in action.
Right.
In the right way. I'm not so there were some places that didn't behave nicely recently, but in our case, it just rain, even without wind. Just rain.
Well, Dr. Shai, that's actually a really nice segue as we wind down our conversation now in terms of relaxation, because you have such a high-powered position. You've held these remarkable roles throughout your extraordinary career, very senior leadership roles indeed. How do you relax? What do you do in your downtime?
I'm doing sport every day between 6 to 7:30. I exercise. I used to go to the gym, but first of all, gyms were not available recently, and now I don't have time for that. But at home, I have a treadmill and I have some weights, and I can just exercise every day. I watch television, I listen to radio, I watch Netflix. I do three things at the same time in order not to get bored. But every day I can see you, I can show you on my I watch now. I've done 1,400 or 100 steps so far, almost 11 kilometers, which is like 7 miles or even 8 miles. So I do it every day. And that's if without that, even in the States, when I traveled recently, 6 o'clock, I woke up my staff and I said, we're going to the gym. I opened the gym in many hotels, but I felt very comfortable about it. I was tired later, but I can't give up. This is my major daily entertainment. That's where I get all the energy for the rest of the day.
Dr. Shai, kindred spirits. So when I come to Jerusalem, can we work out together? Because I begin my day also with a workout.
Okay, let's do it. But I do it inside, not outside. I used to run Jerusalem, marathon and stuff like that. But now I do it at home because I don't have to go outside. And then some other concerns about being outside. So I prefer to stay at home.
Were you a marathon runner?
No, I ran 10 kilometers in Jerusalem many times. Not the entire marathon, 10 kilometers. But believe me, in 10 kilometers, you cover it all. You go all around the city and you pass the sites I know very much because I was born in that city. The place I was born, the place I was raised, the place I got married to Rivka, the place where I used to travel on the train to Tel Aviv. Every corner in Jerusalem remind me something else. So after 10 kilometers, I'm very tired and very happy at the same time.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it on that happy note.
Okay,
Dr. Nachman Shai, we want to thank you so much for joining us here on IsraelCast. We look forward to seeing you in Israel, of course, but always want to have you back here for more conversation as well. So thanks so much for that. Sure. And of course, we'll have information about Dr. Nachman Shai on the show notes page of our website, jnf.org/IsraelCast. And before we move on with housekeeping, I'd like to remind you that Jewish National Fund USA believes that the time has indeed come for us to reclaim the narrative, take ownership of the word Zionism, and show the world how beautiful, inclusive, and inspirational it really is, as we were just talking about. So do join Jewish National Fund USA's Conversations on Zionism, Reclaiming the Narrative. It's a year-long campaign which will educate, engage, and inspire on the true meaning of the word Zionism and reclaim its true meaning indeed in all its glory. Go to youtube.com/Zionism Studios. Once again, youtube.com/Zionism Studios. And of course, we do release new episodes of IsraelCast every other Wednesday. And just so you never miss an episode, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Simply search for IsraelCast, that easy. And don't forget to rate and review us to make it easier for more people around the world to find us. Or you can always enjoy the show by visiting us at our website. Once again, it's jnf.org/IsraelCast. Now, it takes a whole moshav to put IsraelCast together. And for that, we thank Vivian Grossman, Dara Shapiro, and many more. Our editors are Jay Rothman and James Casada for Miratone Studios in the very heart of New York City. And the music that you hear at the top until the program is titled My Eden. It's by the very talented Rafi Malkiel from his album Water on the Tzaddik label. Now, IsraelCast is powered by Jewish National Fund USA, your voice in Israel. For more information about JNF USA, visit jnf.org. And if you'd like to write to us with story ideas or just to say howdy, we'd all love to hear from you. So do email us at israelcast@jnf.org. Meantime, I'm Steven Shalowitz, thanking you for tuning in and looking forward to having you join us on future episodes of IsraelCast.